The American Actors Union SAG-AFTRA went on strike in July over an ongoing labor dispute with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which coincided with the Writers Guild of America strike as part of broader Hollywood labor disputes. These strikes have brought to light the incredibly poor working conditions many actors, writers, and other creatives have been made to withstand, with complaints far broader than just unfair pay and lack of residual payments, including the use of non-consensual AI, meaning background actors would be paid for only one day of work and have their likeness owned by a studio, the severe lack of rest breaks, and actors being kicked off the union insurance plan after they turn 65. The SAG-AFTRA strike is only an example of one industry that is pushing back against poor working conditions. The only reason it's becoming so popular is because it's in Hollywood. Currently, workers are striking and voicing their worries about their employment across the world in almost every field. UPS drivers, rail workers, air travel employees, and teachers, just to name a few. It's fair to assume that work isn't a great experience for anyone except the CEOs right now. However, a plethora of celebrities have made it clear that they are against the strike, calling it unnecessary and distressing. You might not understand why anyone in the business would be against a strike that is fighting for them to have rightful lunch breaks and equitable pay, but when you hear the names on this list, it might make a little more sense for you. Coming in at number 10 is Ted Sarandos, CEO of the streaming giant Netflix. Oh, the CEO of Netflix is a money-hungry monster who doesn't want to pay writers or actors even though they are his bottom line? What a surprise. The so-called creative head of the Netflix team has been racking up millions of dollars while the writers and actors for the shows that made those millions can barely afford to buy food or keep a roof over their head without working a minimum wage job on the side. Kimiko Glenn, who starred in Orange is the New Black, has spoken out about the fact that her naked body will continue to exist on Netflix but will only make $27 in residuals. People have been speculating that Netflix has been inflating viewership numbers since the beginning so that stock prices stay high. But they obviously didn't think ahead because these numbers have done more than just bring up the stocks, but also make actors think they are entitled to a bigger residual check. If Netflix wants to make it seem like their shows are huge with arbitrary ratings, then they should stick to the script and pay their actors, because these 81-cent residual checks made to actors like Mandy Moore, who took a starring role in This Is Us, are kind of letting Netflix tell on themselves that this speculation may have some weight to it. At number 9 is Matt Damon. In a tweet by the publication Deadline, which was quickly fact-checked and disputed, claimed that Matt Damon was against the strike. During an interview with the Oppenheimer premiere, Damon apparently said that Hollywood labor strikes will be brutal for actors and his own production company. As well, he said that the strike has shut down one of his own company's films. This tweet has since been deleted since the phrase was exposed to be cherry-picked from a longer interview where Damon also said, "We gotta hold strong until we get a deal that's fair." Twitter users have been buzzing about this tweet. One user, Samosas and Popcorn, wrote, "Just an FYI that Deadline Hollywood is probably literally so deep in studios' pockets that they're omitting context to make the WGA and SAG strikes look like they're being done in bad faith. They're scumbags for trying to build a negative narrative against struggling creatives." At number 8 is Kenneth Branagh. Deadline didn't stop with Damon. Alongside the former, decided to put out a tweet just as incorrect and cherry-picked about an interview with Kenneth, claiming that he said, "I hope as everyone does that it resolves itself quickly," making it seem like this was in context of just wanting to get it over with. Deadline neglected to include that he was in solidarity with the SAG-AFTRA strike. Twitter users weren't relaxed about this one either, with Zoe Rose Bryant writing, "Disgusted by Deadline's misrepresentation of actors' opinions on the SAG strike, continuing to cherry-pick quotes that show skepticism instead of support." Coming in at number 7 is Jenna Ortega. After it was revealed that she will continue to work on the film Death of a Unicorn despite the strike, people began to assume that Jenna was against it, as this would mean that she would be deliberately going against the rules set out by the union for what the strike entailed. However, just because it's a movie does not mean that it's tied to what the actors and writers are striking against. In fact, it is quite the opposite. The strike is against the AMPTP and welcomes the work of indie filmmakers. SAG-AFTRA has granted approval to 39 independent productions to shoot during the strike, and after confirming that they're not tied to the AMPTP companies, including Death of a Unicorn. Jenna also posted an Instagram story reposting a New York Times article entitled, "Actors Join Writers' Strike, Bringing Hollywood to a Standstill," so it seems like the strikes got Jenna's obvious support. Also, it would make no sense that the star of Wednesday, one of Netflix's top shows, would be against having her perpetual use of likeness compensated. At number 6 is Paul Rudd. Rudd is also set to act in the film Death of a Unicorn, leading people to believe the same thing about him that they did about Ortega, believing that he was deliberately going against union strike rules. However, this was not the case. First of all, because of the formerly mentioned fact that the film is part of 39 independent productions that received approval from the unions to continue to shoot. In fact, being a part of the project is in support of the strike because it supports smaller creators instead of doing the alternative, only giving your craft to big-name studios. Coming in at number 5 is Bob Iger. The chief executive officer of Disney is unsurprisingly against the strike that is making it harder to pad his bottom line, and by harder, I mean that in no way because he will continue to make more money than he can spend for the rest of his life. Although he takes in a staggering $75,000 a day on the backs of workers who, as I've said before, can't afford to feed themselves, he still can't seem to figure out why people are causing a scene. During an appearance on CNBC, the Disney CEO said that the ongoing WGA strike and imminent decision for the SAG-AFTRA to join them do not have realistic expectations, adding that it's very disturbing. His full quote went, "We've talked about the disruptive forces on this business and all the challenges we're facing, the recovery from COVID, which is is ongoing, it's not completely back. This is the worst time in the world to add to that disruption. Which is very odd for him to say, considering that his bank account was probably the least affected from COVID, and the background actors that are relying on the residual checks are one accident away from losing their apartment. Iger went on to say, "I understand any labor organization's desire to work on behalf of its members to get the compensation and be compensated fairly based on the value that they deliver. We managed as an industry to negotiate a very good deal with the Directors Guild that reflects the value that the directors contribute to this great business. We wanted to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic, and they are adding to the set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive." Yeah, Bob, I bet it's absurdly disruptive for your employees to ask for fair pay and lunch breaks. I bet it's just so incredibly irritating to have your exploitation called out and no longer seen as the norm. Wouldn't it just be so awful to make a few less million a day? Are we supposed to feel bad for you? At number 4 is David Zaslav, the Warner Brothers Discovery CEO. What a shock. Another CEO on the list about people who are against a strike from workers who want better work environments. Zaslav felt the effect of the strike while delivering a commencement speech at Boston University, his alma mater, in May. His speech, which included the quote from General Electric CEO Jack Welch told him, "If you want to be successful, you're going to have to figure out how to get along with everyone, and that includes difficult people," which is a complete slap in the face to what is going on right now, and rightfully received boos from spectating students in between chants of "pay your writers." 10 days later, the university's president published an op-ed in the school's newspaper chastising the students for their behavior and apologizing to Zaslav, even though the treatment he got was absolutely fair. In a statement after the speech, Zaslav said, "I am immensely supportive of writers and hope the strike is resolved soon, even though he is one of the figureheads in charge of doing such a thing." During an appearance on CNBC earlier this month, in which he discussed the company's $50 million profit, Zaslav said the compensation disputes stem from ongoing changes in the industry. He said, quote, "The industry is in the middle of some significant disruption and people are changing the way they consume content, so it's very difficult to figure out how does that work, what's the right value for it. So I guess if you can't figure out what the value of the work is, you just don't have to pay them at all." Yeah. For sure. At number 3 is Bob Bakish. Paramount Global CEO Bob Bakish addressed the writer's strike during Paramount's earnings call, stating that the writers are an essential part of the creative content and we hope we can come to a resolution that works for everyone fairly quickly. However, he added, "It's also fair to say that there's a really big gap. Obviously, we've been planning for this. We do have many levers to pull and that'll allow us to manage through the strike, even if it's for an extended duration," which aren't words someone would say if they were expecting to stop mistreating the employees. Bakish also said, "In terms of those levers, we have a lot, so to speak, content in the can. So, with the exception of things like late night, consumers really won't notice anything for a while. Add that to a broad range of reality and unscripted shows where we're definitely a leader, as well as sports that's not affected. So we can do more in those areas if necessary." So yeah, great. We can just keep pumping out that garbage television slop, because everyone's brains have already been rotted enough that they won't even notice that there's no soul behind anything they're consuming anymore. Who needs a story or plotline or well-acted character when we have Big Brother and Teen Mom, which, may I add, both have teams of writers who are also severely underpaid. It is extremely unnerving to see a CEO's move during a strike be, "Oh, don't worry about it, we still have all that trash in the vault that we can feed the people," instead of doing anything that might help the current situation and give people their livelihoods back. Our runner-up goes to the unnamed studio executives that Deadline mentioned in their article entitled "Hollywood Studios WGA Strike Endgame is to let writers go broke before resuming talks in fall," which explains exactly what they may have said. Since the writers' strike began in May, every production company in the AMPTP, including the ones mentioned in this list, have become determined to break the WGA, as one unnamed studio exec blatantly put it. To do so, the studios and the AMPTP believe that by October, most writers will be running out of money after 5 months on the picket lines and no work. That same exec said, "The endgame is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses." A studio executive told Deadline one insider called it "cruel but necessary evil." "It is so wonderful to see the bosses care so much about their employees enough to not listen to their concerns and instead hope they go unhoused. This is so full of humanity." Our number 1 spot goes to Chad Nelson and Greg Brockman. The CEOs of OpenAI have made a full film with AI without the direct use of creatives or actors. This coming out amidst the controversy of actors non-consensually having their likenesses recorded, paid for one day, and utilized for the rest of time, so it goes without saying that this AI work does not leave me with a great taste in my mouth. Everything is just about making content as fast as possible for as cheap as possible, which is obviously how you produce stuff that is meaningful and will hold up for the test of time, not just taking up space on servers and inevitably adding to the global warming crisis we're currently under. No! How could that happen? And that is our list of the top 10 celebrities who refused to support the SAG strike. Let us know if we forgot anybody in the comments below, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one.